Garage, where today we are going to be going over our Week 11 power rankings for the 2025 season. And let's not waste any time. Let's get into these power rankings. So the first tier of teams we have the Titans at 32, the Raiders at 31, the Browns at 30, and the Jets at 29. Titans didn't play last week. I still think they are one of the worst teams. Now they actually have the worst record at 1 win. I think every other team has at least 2. It just hasn't looked good recently for the Titans, or the whole season, really, for the Titans. So they stay at 32. Raiders at 31. I know you only lost to the Broncos by 3, but it was a horrible game to watch. Yes, the Raiders almost beat the Jags, but the Jags haven't looked great. They didn't look great against Houston in the second half. The Raiders just haven't been good. And honestly, I'd take the Jets and the Browns over the Raiders at the current time. I wouldn't take the Browns by that much. Right? The Browns are very similar to the Raiders, I think. And they lost to the Jets, which is the only reason why the Jets went up to 29 is because I think the Browns are better than the Raiders and the Titans, and the Jets beat the Browns. So that's why the Jets go up all the way up to 29 for the Jets going up 2 spots. But again, these are just the bottom 4 teams, the worst of the worst. Next tier, it's a big tier. We have the Giants at 28, the Commanders at 27, the Saints at 26, the Bengals at 25, the Cowboys at 24, the Dolphins at 23, the Vikings at 22, and the Cardinals at 21. This is actually supposed to be 2 different tiers. The Commanders, Giants, Saints, Bengals is 1 tier, and then the Cowboys, Dolphins, Vikings, and Cardinals are another. Just so you know. Giants at 28 going from 24 all the way to 28. It wasn't a pretty game against the Bears. Yeah, they were up big, choked once another lead. That's like the 4th time they've blown like a 10-0 lead. Jackson Darts looked good, although who knows if he's going to play next week. And honestly, I'm really impressed with Jackson Dart because you look at the offense and all the injuries they dealt with, and I don't know how Dart is playing as well as he is, especially when you consider how bad the defense has been as a whole. Their D-line's still really good, but not so much on the secondary. I mean, they just fired their head coach. It's not looking great in New York. Then the Commanders at 27. I honestly wanted to put them below the Giants, but I think with a healthy Jaden Daniels, they'd beat the Giants more times than not, and that they're a better team than the Giants. It's very close. But one thing that really helps the Commanders, I know they both beat the Chargers, the Commanders and the Giants. Commanders did beat them worse than the Giants did. But I just think that when Jaden Daniels has been healthy, this Commanders team has been pretty good. I don't know about pretty. The offense has been solid at times. And I think they're just a better team right now than the Giants with Jaden Daniels. Saints going from 30 to 26 after their big win against the Panthers. Tyler Shuck looked actually pretty good in that game against the Panthers defense that at times this season has been solid. So for Shuck to have that type of performance was very impressive to see. I'm still not going to be too high on the Saints. They very well could easily go right back down to the low 20s, or high 20s, low 30s very quickly, but it was an impressive win against the Panthers, so I do think they deserve to go up a few spots. Bengals at 25 didn't play this week. Joe Burrow is coming back soon. Still, again, I still think they are better than the teams below them, and they're like the best bad to really bad team, especially offensively. So I think they didn't play, which is the main reason why they stood at 25. Cowboys at 24, another team that did not play. The only reason they went down 1 spot is because the Dolphins deserve to go up spots, right? That's pretty much the only reason. And I was flipping between the Dolphins and the Cowboys, who to have at 23 and who to have at 24. But honestly, I think right now I'd rather have the Dolphins over the Cowboys. I know it's crazy to say after how the Dolphins started this season, but the Dolphins have been competitive in a lot of good games so far this year. They just blew out the Bills. Like, they didn't just beat them, they blew them out. So I rather would have the Dolphins over the Cowboys, and that is basically the only reason the Cowboys went down a spot. Vikings stay at 22. It wasn't the prettiest game against the Ravens. They looked decent at the beginning of the game and then kind of fell apart when the Ravens defense stepped up. J.J. McCarthy threw those 2 interceptions on those deep balls. It wasn't the worst performance overall, but also definitely wasn't the best. I still would take them over teams like Miami, um, Dallas, and especially Cincinnati after what they did to them earlier in the season. And then the Cardinals at 21, blowout loss to the Seahawks. I mean, Brissett still didn't look that bad, to be honest, outside of the 2 fumbles that got scored for a touchdown. He didn't play that bad in that game. I know the Seahawks might not have been trying too hard because they had a 35-point lead within the first half. But the Cardinals honestly have looked better with Jacoby Brissett compared to with Kyler Murray. So we'll see what that means going forward. I still think I couldn't put the Cardinals below the Cowboys after what they did to them not too long ago. And I think I would take them over teams like Minnesota and Miami. Next tier is the Falcons at 20, the Panthers at 19, the Jags at 18, and the Texans at 17. Falcons stay at 20. They actually played the Colts, who've been one of the better teams in the league, pretty well. The defense looked good for about half of that game, 3/4 of that game, until Jonathan Taylor really got going there at the end. And I continue to be impressed with the Falcons' defense. A lot of young guys on that defense, a lot of rookies continue to play well. And then offensively, Drake London had another good game, back-to-back really good games for Drake London. Bijan didn't have his best game, and he's been struggling a little bit recently. Still not sure how I feel about Michael Penix. But again, losing to one of the better teams in the league in overtime, I feel like doesn't deserve to knock you down, especially because I think there's a decent-sized gap between the Falcons and the Cardinals. Panthers at 19, very, very tough loss to the Saints at home, coming off of their big win against Green Bay, and they just didn't really do much of anything against the Saints. I still am going to take them over the Falcons, obviously. They beat them 30-0 earlier this season, and I think they've shown a little more consistency than teams like Arizona and Minnesota, and then obviously they beat Miami and Dallas, so I didn't want to put them down further than 19, but they play Atlanta this week, so we'll see if they can bounce back. So that will pretty much determine what team goes up to 19 likely and what team goes down to 20 unless one of them gets blown out. And then it's kind of the same thing there with Jags and Houston at 18 and 17. Jags go down 2 spots after their big choke to Houston. They played so good in the first half and half of the third quarter. They looked very good. Trevor Lawrence was playing good. Parker Washington had himself a nice game. At least he had some nice plays in that game. And then it all fell apart. They had 2 yards of offense in the second half or in the fourth quarter. I don't remember exactly what it was, and they just let Houston come back. Hence why Houston goes up 17 spots. They beat the number 16 team going into that week in my power rankings, so they get a big boost from 22 to 17. Davis Mills, one of the best quarterback performances of the week. Who would have thought? We'll see if C.J. Stroud comes back, but I don't think the Texans have necessarily the hardest schedule going forward. So maybe, I don't know if they're getting in the playoffs. That offense just has too many inconsistencies, but defense continues to be one of the best in the league. Wasn't great to start that game against Jacksonville, but they really locked in towards the end when the game started to get competitive again. So big win for Houston going up 5 spots. Next here we have Pittsburgh at 16, Chicago at 15, San Fran at 14, Green Bay 13, Baltimore at 12, and the Broncos at 11. Pittsburgh 16, tough loss to the Chargers, really didn't look great at all on offense. Defense played pretty solid, and they have played pretty solid to really good the last 2 or 3 weeks. Still a top half team in the league. They might still sneak in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin's going to get himself an above 500 record. And they're still a good team, but they definitely haven't shown really a ton of consistency on offense and defense, to be honest. Bears at 15, big comeback win against the Giants at home. Caleb Williams and that offense continues to play very good. And I really like how they're distributing the ball. One game, Colston Loveland has a really good game. And then next, it's Rome Odunze. Then they'll get DJ Moore involved. They have a lot of pieces that they can really distribute the ball. And you really never know who's going to have the really good game, whether it's also Kyle Monangai. You don't know who's going to have the really good game on that Bears offense. I feel like that is the sign of a good offense. Caleb's playing great. He's finally getting comfortable in that Ben Johnson system. It's just that defense that has really let them down, which is surprising. But I guess they do I think they are pretty banged up on that defense as well. But again, big win against the Giants. bumping up 3 spots. San Fran at 14 and Green Bay at 13. I can kind of talk about both these teams. Both just lost to good teams narrowly. I guess not narrowly. The Niners got blown out by the Rams, but the Rams are one of the best teams in football, so you can't get too mad. And again, all their injuries, they've massively exceeded expectations due to all these injuries, and they're still playing super good despite it. Mac Jones has looked great. We'll see what happens when Brock Purdy comes back, though. And then Green Bay, 2 very ugly losses in back-to-back weeks, losing at home to the Panthers when you allow them to score 16 points and you still lose, and then losing to Philly at home when you only allow 10 points. That's not. And they also held Cleveland under 16 when they lost to them at home. So it hasn't been great for Green Bay. I'm not going to put them too far down because they've had to have some really good games. Their team is still very, very good. But I'm very skeptical about the Packers right now. Ravens at 12, big jump up from 15 to 12. They've won, 3 in a row now? They were 1-5. They're now 4-5. The offense looks a lot better with Lamar Jackson. Who would have thought? Derrick Henry's playing well. And the defense has looked pretty solid for the Ravens for the most part. It was getting a little rough there at the beginning of that Vikings game, but they really locked in. They've had 3 solid good games on defense. Probably the main reason why they've been able to win 3 in a row is because of that defense. This happened last year with the Ravens. The defense started off slow and they played really well towards the end. So we'll see if that can happen again, but I do think the Ravens have a very legit chance to get themselves in the playoffs despite starting 1-5. And then the last team in this tier is the Broncos at 11. I know they're 8-2. I don't really care. Bo Nix has not looked good this season, considering they're 8-2. He's looked good when it mattered most. Right? He's been very good in the clutch, but overall he has not been good. They're expecting their defense to do way too much. The defense basically has to play near perfect football for them to stay in games, especially if they're playing a good team. I mean, the defense had to do that when they played the Raiders at home. So yes, they're 8-2, so they're still going to be high on the rankings because you are 8-2. But it's very shaky for the. They could even be. I mean, they could be 7-3 if they didn't get that call against the Colts. But yeah, I don't really know. They did get the call against the Colts. I'm forgetting who won that game. I should be remembering what happened in that game, but yeah, the Colts got the call, excuse me. So the Broncos could even be 9-1 right now. And if the Broncos were 9-1, I'd probably still have them at 11 because their offense just hasn't looked good at all. But once again, their defense continues to be one of the best in the league. Next tier is the Chiefs at 10, the Chargers at 9, the Bills at 8, the Bucs at 7, and the Patriots at 6. Chiefs at 10, I know they didn't play, so it seems kind of unfair to move them down 2 spots. But when New England deserves to go up a lot, and when the Chargers, I think, deserve to go up a little bit, it's going to knock the Chiefs down to 10. And another reason is the Bills deserve to go down from their loss to Miami, and they also deserve to be above the Chiefs, which is another reason why the Chiefs went down 2 spots. But we'll see what they do coming out the bye week. It's been a very interesting season for the Chiefs. Obviously, they've been much better once Rashid Rice has gotten back. He's gotten the ball a ton. They're really making sure he gets the football. Mahomes continues to play pretty good for most of the season, so we'll see what they do out of the bye week. But again, they only went down 2 spots because of New England winning and Buffalo losing. Chargers at 9, big dominant win against the Steelers. Despite the injuries to that O-line, Herbert had another good game. Ladd McConkey had a very good game. The run game continues to not really be existent. But when Herbert's throwing the ball like 40 times a game, and if he can have success and have time in the pocket, sometimes it doesn't matter. But I was very impressed with the Chargers' defense against Pittsburgh. So if they can continue to keep that up, they could probably keep going up the rankings. Buffalo and Tampa here at 8-7. 2 tough losses. Buffalo, obviously, a lot worse of a loss than Tampa Bay. Losing to Miami. I mean, they were down 16-0 at one point, and they couldn't stop Devon Achane at all. That weak run defense, which didn't look too bad against the Panthers, didn't look too bad against the Chiefs. They showed their true colors against Miami. Achane had a fantastic game. And the Bills I don't think they have, you obviously have the quarterback in Josh Allen. But I just don't know if they have the defense to take them to a Super Bowl. That's not a Super Bowl caliber defense, especially in the playoffs when teams are going to want to run the ball. It's just they've just been too inconsistent on defense. They're still very good, but I think they have to go after losing to Miami, who has been one of the worst teams in football. You got to move down few spots. And then Tampa at 7, losing to New England, who is at 6 now. I mean, the offensive struggles continue in Tampa Bay. Baker hasn't looked his best. Yes, there's been a ton of injuries, but they were making that work earlier in the year. They had a ton of injuries, and they were still making it work. I think the real reason why the offense has struggled, or part of the reason, is the run game hasn't been there. Now, it hasn't really been there a ton the last, ever since Baker got there, to be honest. But they've been so banged up in that running back room that I think that is playing a bigger part, honestly, than maybe even the receiver injuries, because you still got Tez Johnson, you still got Emeka Egbuka, you still got Cade Otton at tight end, but the offense has just been very inconsistent. But the defense, I thought the offense would be the really consistent good part of this team, whereas the defense not so much, but it's kind of been the other way around, and the Bucs defense has played very good. Honestly, did pretty good against New England. The only reason part of the reason New England scored a lot of points is because they had 3 explosive plays. They had the Trayvon Henderson first touchdown run, because the second one was in the game, was not basically over, but it was nearly over. They had the first Trayvon Henderson run, which was a lot of yards. They had the Kyle Williams touchdown, and then they had the Mac Hollins catch. And then after the Mac Hollins catch, might have been when they ended up picking off Drake May in the end zone. So if it wasn't for those 3 explosive plays, Tampa Bay did a really good job against a very good New England offense this season. So I've been very impressed with Tampa's defense and not so impressed with their offense. Granted, they have been banged up. And then on the flip side, New England goes up 3 spots, almost in that top 5 New England. The reason they're not quite there is just because they have had a very easy schedule, and there's been a lot of games against not so good teams that they haven't really beaten by as much as maybe they should. Again, they're still at 6. I still have them over teams they beat. Tampa and Buffalo finally gave them their respect over Buffalo. But I just think the 5 teams I'd take over them, especially when it comes to playoff time. I think I'd take the 5 teams that I have over them over the Patriots. At 5, we have the Detroit Lions going up 2 spots from 7 to 5. Big time win against the Commanders. Honestly, not really much to say. The Lions just did what the Lions do, and that's blow out bad teams, put up insane amount of points on offense, and get the job done and move on to the next week. Still one of the better teams in the league. Still going to be... They're now, I believe, in first place in that division because Green Bay and Minnesota lost, and they have that tiebreaker over Chicago. But Detroit has been looking pretty good for the most part of the last 5 or 6 weeks. At 4, we do have the Colts staying at 4. I know they got a win against the Falcons. The other 3 teams ahead of them also won. Again, same thing with the Patriots. Not the most difficult schedule. And they've beaten the bad teams a little bit more than the Patriots, which is why I have them a little bit above the Patriots. But I need to see a little bit more for this Colts team. Not regular. They're going to be a really good team for the rest of the regular season. I believe that. But if I want to have confidence in them in the playoffs, I need to see a little bit more from this Colts team before they head to the playoffs. Because they still play teams I think they still play Kansas City. They might even play Seattle. I'm not sure. But they'll get some tests before the playoffs come around. At number 3, I have the Rams going up from 6 to 3. Big win against San Fran. Blowout win. Stafford, I think, just had his, 3rd straight game with 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He continues to be playing at an MVP level. I know we all want Jonathan Taylor to win MVP, but he likely won't because they just give it to the quarterback. But if you are forced to give it to a quarterback, I feel like it has to be Matthew Stafford. He's playing phenomenal despite a guy like Puka Nacua constantly being in and out. Him and Devontae Adams have developed a pretty good connection so far. And that Rams defense also continues to be very good. A little susceptible in the pass game, in the secondary, but outside of that, their front 7 and their run defense has been very good this year. At number 2, I have the Seahawks, and at number 1, I have the Eagles. I know it's a little controversial to have the Eagles at 1 after beating the Packers 10-7 on Monday night. But the main reason why I have the Eagles at 1 is because they showed that in the last 3 weeks or so, they've played very good. Defense has played and they showed you in the game against Green Bay that their defense is still very good. You saw how much of an impact Jalen Phillips made in his first game with Philly. And then when they needed their offensive playmakers to make up, to step up and make plays, they did in the form of Saquon's big run and Devonta Smith's touchdown catch. I still think they're one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl because they have the experience, unlike Sam Darnold, unlike Daniel Jones, unlike Drake May, guys like that. They have the championship experience. It's really just them and Matthew Stafford in that top that have won the Super Bowls. So I still have the Eagles at 1, but they are very close with Seattle and with the Rams. And I very easily could have put them at 2 or 3. But I think because one of Seattle or Rams are guaranteed to beat the other, unless they tie, I guess, the winner of that will probably jump up to 1 just because that's such an impressive win. But right now I'm going to keep Philly at 1 because they were 1 and they won a game on the road against Green Bay. So, and then Seattle at 2, who I didn't get to talk about here. Big win against Arizona. They were up by a lot super early in the game. The game was over basically. Honestly, when Sam Darnold throws that deep touchdown to JSN and then Jacoby Brissett gets the first fumble that DeMarcus Lawrence picks up and returns to the end zone, the game was over at that point, and then it just got worse and worse. Sam Darnold threw like 20 passes, he threw like 16 passes for like 150 yards, and they won by 20. So Seattle continues to be one of the best teams in the league, both offense and defense. And again, big game between them and the Rams, which will probably determine who is the best team in the league at that point in time. But that will conclude our power rankings for Week 11. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.